A nice back-to-back of races before we go into a 4-week break, which is just ridiculous that the calendar was set up in this way. We have plenty of upgrades to go over, the big Ferrari upgrade as well to talk about, and some teams still keeping some stuff hidden before Friday practice. Right before getting into it, I wanted to thank you guys for support, killing it per usual, and just makes me happy to see everything that we've built up and how it's going so far, and it's only going to get better from here. If you're new here, please go ahead and subscribe. It'd mean the world to me. But let's get started into the upgrades for this week. Firstly, I want to speak on the one-off liveries before we get into the rear wings. We got the Mercedes Blue Patronus livery. I think it looks beautiful. Personally, I like the livery like this, and I think under the lights it's going to look extremely good and much better than the actual silver that they typically have. Next team is this crazy RB jean ripped with the zippers in the back type livery. I think it looks super slick. I don't think it's going to be everybody's cup of tea, but it looks pretty damn good from every angle, especially if you're looking at it from the side angle. You can actually see that little zipper they've done between the engine cover and the side pod area. I think it looks very slick. I'm shocked that Boss did it here in Singapore rather than actually US, but maybe it has something to do with company. I didn't read up too much onto it, but I think the livery looks really cool. Under the lights, it might be a little too dark, but we'll have to see. And last team is the McLaren with the orange and white, typically orange and black, but they've just reversed the colors. I think it looks cool, very reminiscent of the old days with Senna and Prost. I think now more so than before, but I think the other two one-offs that we've gotten from both Mercedes and RB look just a tad bit better. It's not like they're the best one-off livery designs ever, but I do think it looks pretty cool coming in Singapore. I think the Red Bull one would have looked pretty cool as well, but obviously we're not getting that with them trying to save weight because of what's going on in the race. But now we can go over our rear wings. Let's start off with Red Bull, Mercedes, Ferrari, and McLaren. Now in this photo, the McLaren rear wing is covered, and some people were speculating because of what's going on with the mini DRS and so on. But I'll tell you this, it was just for their one-off livery. It wasn't actually revealed up until recently. There is pictures of it without that section, which we'll go over, but just for here, it doesn't really take away from what the downforce level is and so on. Looking at it, the Red Bull rear wing is a high downforce, super high downforce. All the rear wings here are going to be like that, but we can differentiate which one's going to be super high downforce, and just a tad bit lower than the others. Red Bull is going to be that super high downforce, while Mercedes is at max downforce. Looking at the upper and the lower planes, Mercedes has the biggest upper and lower plane combination of the four teams. Ferrari is also using a high downforce rear wing, but it's lower than both the Red Bull and the Mercedes, and McLaren is in the same boat as Ferrari. So those two are pretty similar, while Mercedes and Red Bull are also pretty similar. Looking at the next four teams in different combination taken by Albert Fabrega, Williams, Alpine, Sauber, and Haas. Typically we have Aston Martin and RB here, but the other two rear wings we're going to go over in just a little bit are RB and Aston Martin together. Now the Williams, per usual, is bringing packages to every track they can. They've brought that high downforce package for Singapore, pretty impressive. They have a very high downforce rear wing. Alpine is also in combination with them. Both of them have pretty much a maxed out rear wing. It's so funny to see the contrast between what they had in Baku to here. They pretty much had a paper plane on top for the Baku GP for Alpine, and now they have this big bulky wing. They're gonna need it, but they've actually been pretty good in slow speed corners, so I wouldn't count them out here. Looking at Sauber, we've seen this same rear wing in Monaco. Big, bulky, super high downforce, all of them about the same if you look at the lower and the upper plane. And Haas has just a little bit less downforce than the other three teams, but still a high downforce rear wing. Also a package that they brought in Monaco, which was a shock because typically Haas doesn't have packages like this. In the last two teams is RB and Aston Martin. RB is running also a very high downforce rear wing. We still have yet to see that combination of aerodynamics they want to put onto this car. Aston Martin has ran this rear wing before, big and bulky, both super high downforce. That upper plane on the Aston Martin is very high for the DRS effectiveness. They're trying to go for more of a qualifying-ish setup, but we'll have to see if it ends up working out. Fernando so far isn't too positive. I do think they have a chance here of getting into Q3, but it's going to be very tight in that midfield. But as I was talking about the rear wing for McLaren, here it is with that livery part to it. And you've already seen a picture of it, but here's just the rear wing itself showing you how it looks. There's not really much hiding to it. It's more of the mechanism and how they've made the flexibility in those parts. While the car is moving in different downforce levels, the rear wing kind of adjusts to it. I would say it's pretty much up to the weight distribution in that rear wing as to how it works. Checo has already talked a lot about it, calling it illegal, which from their end is smart. They're obviously going to say whatever they can to get McLaren down in pace, and that is, I guess, an effective method, talking about the team and seeing if there's any way that FIA can intervene. They've talked about it. They've said that the rear wing passes all the tests. They will monitor it, and they do have the right to change it if they would like to. Will it happen? I'm not sure. McLaren does have big upgrades for this GP. Looking at the car itself though, and looking at the floor design, looking at the engine cover, the actual rear wing itself is taken straight from Zandvoort. It's still super high, but not the highest that they've had. And the actual aero kit itself, other than the engine cover is taken straight from Monaco with those exact same gills. The actual cooling grates themselves are very opened up considering it's going to be a hot GP, but with the rain incoming, I do think teams are going to start closing this much more, and we're going to see pretty much no cooling, at least from the gills on the engine cover. They should be closed up come Saturday and Sunday for this GP, as there is predicted rain, and typically most people that live there in Singapore, at least from what I've seen, say that rain is projected every single day, and typically there is some, at least a little bit in the day. But the upgrades that they were talking about, we won't know till Friday. There are parts that should be coming in by Friday, and we'll see them. Floor is what's speculated, and that's probably what we're going to see. Could they revert back and forth? I'm not sure. Speaking of floors, we can go over for Mercedes, and Mercedes is yet again using the floor before the Belgium spec, as this has been their most efficient setup. They were very good in the slow speed corners. In Belgium, they just could not get down on that floor. That's been used in a couple of GPs, but it really hasn't correlated to what they've been wanting. So there is a big projected package for Coda, but here it's pretty much the same car. Yet again, as you can see on the engine cover, cooling is completely opened up. This will close progressively as we get to Sunday. We also have a great image of the Imola Aston Martin floor that will be used here in Singapore. And it really shows you those smooth detailed lines. It even shows you how that part to the diffuser is made. But looking at it, you can see how closely together that first part of the Venturi tunnels is to the bib tray, and that it's a completely different design to what they had in Hungary. They did find a lot of grip on Fernando's car. Lance's data was actually correlating to what they thought it would be, and Fernando found an unexpected amount of grip in downforce, so hopefully they can get on top of that. If they can, they should be projected much higher than 7th, as Fernando is talking about. But this was the floor that completely screwed up what type of balance they had in the car, so it's interesting to see it back. There might have been something that intrigued them about it. They brought it back. They worked good in Baku, but this is a completely different circuit, so let's see what happens. The biggest upgrade coming here was obviously going to come from Ferrari, who announced maybe like about 2 or 3 days ago that they would be bringing this flexi front wing. And as you can see, Formula Uno took some great pictures of it, the old and the new. It shows you exactly what has been done differently. And obviously we're going to see the effects of this in the race. We'll see how much it can flex back and forth. There is a little dot on it to track that flexing. So yes, they can still somewhat intervene if the whole wing is flexing down completely and going up completely for more higher or lower downforce. But they've changed that edge part to the front wing on the end plate. Very similar now to what Haas had it in the beginning of the season. A lot of teams have been now combining with this. The actual wing itself actually looks very similar to that of the SF23, especially the spec they had in the beginning of the year. As you can see, the upper flap has also been enhanced and it is higher, with that lower part of the front wing also having a bigger downward slope than it typically does. And the middle part to the front wing has also been opened up a little bit in comparison to its previous spec. The main part about it is to see the flexing into wing to show you how much they can actually gain time having a flexi-wing. We still have yet to see it on the Red Bull. The Red Bull should have that in COTA. I did think we were going to see more parts on the Red Bull here. They are using that high downforce Hungary package that they originally brought. That will be brought to all these GPs where they can have the high downforce. But Max himself has already said that he's aiming for Q3, but it's a possibility that they don't get into it, which is just very negative aura around that team right now, considering what's been happening and how far behind they've been in GPs that typically they were dominating in. What they do on the front wing will be interesting, whether they go with their previous spec or the newest spec they also brought in Hungary. It's been changed around a lot. The one we're looking at right here is not the Hungary spec, so I wonder whose car this is on and what they decide to do. Typically, it's been Checo using the previous spec, while it's been Max using the Hungary spec. But that's going to do it for Singapore. A lot to come in COTA, and we should see more on Friday as well. If you did enjoy the video, please give it a like and subscribe. It would mean the world, and peace.